It's the return of Pork Apocalypse. Part 2, the sequel, the second half, the next chapter, Wrath of Khan, Electric Boogaloo, all of the above, because there's a lot of relief stuffed into the COVID relief package. Hey, everybody, I'm Steve Green with Bill Whittle and Scott Ott, and this is Right Angle, brought to you by the members of BillWhittle.com. Gentlemen, I hate to do math, but we're going to have to do just a smidge of math. The COVID relief package has $900 billion worth of relief stuffed in there, which if I've done my math correctly, and I have, divided by 330 million Americans, that's about $2,727 per American, man, woman, child, everybody. And yet, the most anybody will get is $600. So the question is, where did the other $2,127 go? That's what we're going to look into. Scott, we're going to start with you. I've got just a few items plucked from Twitter, PJ Media, all kinds of places on what's been stuffed into the porkopolis here. The COVID relief bill creates a committee to regulate performance-enhancing drugs in horse racing. The Kennedy Center is getting yet another bailout. There is $139 million for federal HIV and AIDS workers stationed abroad to buy cars. The COVID relief bill includes funding to discourage teenagers from drinking and hooking up. I think locking them in their homes has pretty much accomplished that. The bill lays the groundwork for a climate security advisory council, which just means another make-work position for people in suits, if I gather that correctly. There's $10 million in gender programs in Pakistan. The bill creates a commission tasked with educating consumers about the dangers associated with using or storing portable fuel containers for flammable liquids near an open flame. Thank goodness we finally got somebody on top of that common danger. Scott, we all know that politicians line up at the trough whenever there's a big spending bill. But didn't it used to be that the pork was the little bit that you had to sweeten on there to get members to vote for the bill, and not 3/4 of the $900 billion that we don't even have?
And I'm sure many of those spending initiatives were justified as having some connection with the pandemic. But the ones you listed here, that seems like a strain at best. And yeah. I was thinking about this morning because I was listening to the news while showering, and I thought, would it be a crime to have bills go through the legislature with one topic and one topic only, and that each initiative must stand or fall on its own merits? And then I realized, yes, it would be a crime, because that's not how legislatures work. Lately, you've been seeing a lot of coverage of the idea of going back to earmarking spending in Congress, because according to the advocates who lament the loss of the earmarks, back then, the reason why we had such comity and civil dialogue in Congress was because everybody was horse trading. So basically they say, well, yeah, you get the military base or the shipbuilding factory in my district, I'll give you the horse racing track in your district. And so they really weren't any more civil or dignified back then than they are now. It's just that they all had something to gain by being nice. And because you can't earmark things like you used to, now you don't have to be nice. But clearly somebody's still doing earmarking. It's like earmarking without the name that it still exists. I think that this is a crime against governance in general, that legislators can pack in things in what is known as a must-pass bill. Basically, this is like the sweetest must-pass bill ever. It's designed to help people in the midst of a pandemic. Who's going to vote against that? Well, I'll tell you who, Ted Cruz, Rand Paul, and a handful of others in the Senate who said, no, this is too much junk. They're seen as evil conservatives when they're basically just standing up and saying, look, if you want to pass a COVID relief bill, that's great. If you want to give money for regulations about where gasoline cans can be, that's great. Do that separately so we're actually voting on the real thing. And then they'll all go home to their districts and they'll run for office by picking the parts of the bill that they like and then saying that that's what they were voting for. And for the parts that they don't like, they'll tell their constituents, well, there was nothing I could do. It was must-pass legislation. You didn't want me to vote against relief for the pandemic, people, did you?
Yeah, it's got to the point where the bill isn't the point anymore. The point is the pork, and the bill is the excuse.
Yeah,
that's where we are now. Bill, I wound up, Scott, with a huge laundry list of items. I'm gonna wind you up with just one that I chose especially for you. Wall Street Journal reports that family members of unauthorized immigrants, or as we call them illegal aliens because that's the legal term, are now eligible to get stimulus checks under the $900 billion deal. That eligibility is retroactive. So adults, again, illegal immigrants, illegal aliens, who were excluded last time could get up to $1,800 now. Or as Ian Miles Chong put it, illegal immigrants get up to $1,800. You, citizen, get $600. Or get stuffed, as I think Washington has just told us.
First of all, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention a tweet that was accompanying an article on this on Instapundit from, looks like Eli Uden, who said, members of Congress got paid $130,000 to spend 9 months arguing about whether we deserve $600. And that's exactly right.
Yeah.
And well, apparently it's taken some wrangling to see if the American citizen's worth $600. It took 10 months to figure out whether the government lockdowns might have done $600 worth of damage to your business or conceivably even more. But never fear, that's the obligation you have as an American citizen. You'll be pleased to know that you may have closed your business because you didn't get the money you needed to stay open because the government that shut you down on the basis of no scientific evidence whatsoever put you out of business. But the main thing to know is that the savings that you paid in taxes while you were running the business is now going to illegal aliens to make sure they get 3 times what you may or may not get. Scott, I was wondering if you might be able to pull out that picture you showed us in the backstage show for what you can buy for $600.
It'll take me a second.
Want to just
here.
fill us in on that?
Yeah, this is on TikTok. I'm real big into TikTok, and let's see. So this is. I'm going to try to hold it up to the camera. Unfortunately, only I am in focus because of the depth of the field here.
That's
I
okay.
can see it just fine.
This is a picture of
Just bring it closer.
Of Home Depot. A Home Depot logo, and in the background you're hearing the Home Depot theme music, and the headline says something you can do with your $600 stimulus check, and then it prices out all the parts to build your own guillotine.
Could you bring it a little closer to whichever?
The problem is if I move it closer to the camera, it goes out of focus because the depth of field on this is pretty tight.
Fine. Yeah.
So,
yeah. That's what you can build with $600. You can build a working guillotine, and I recommend we start building a lot of them. Steve, this kind of, first of all, the $600 check on its own is an insult. I really think it's more of an insult than no bill at all. I really do. I think it is an indication of the scorn and the contempt that they have for people. But it's also good to know, that despite the sacrifices that Americans make, every single dollar that you've ever paid in taxes in your entire life is going to go to the Kennedy Center because God knows the poor Kennedys don't have any money to protect the Kennedy Center with or invest in it in themselves. And that's why people like you and I have to work our entire lives and fork over, 40% of what we make to make sure that the Kennedy Center continues to get the $10 million that it needs because it can't get the money from the people who put it there or the people who perform there or any of the other billionaires that are also going to probably get their $600 check as well. There comes a point when the contempt of a ruling class towards the people reaches critical mass. And if you have a population that's been brutalized for a long, long time, then that critical mass can take quite a while to come. I have to tell you, when I hear that $10 million is going for gender studies in Pakistan, if there was a news media and that was reported to every single American, not only would they have voted differently, but they'd start going to Home Depot and buying the lumber and the rope and the sheet metal that they need. And I don't see how this can continue. Now, I've been surprised before in a very negative way. I didn't think we'd put up with a lot of the stuff we put up with. But when you realize that $600 is a chump change, you can't even have dinner for two at the French Laundry for $600. For God's sakes, that's barely a couple of gallons of ice cream for Nancy Pelosi. That, you know, there comes a point when the aristocracy and the ruling class and the elitists, which will be one of my topics this week, are rubbing your nose in it so much that they really are, I think they are really reaching a point of real danger that they are unaware of and couldn't happen to a nicer bunch of people.
Steve, can I throw something else in here?
Yeah, please do.
I think the thing that gets lost in a lot of the conversation about this relief bill is actually where the money's coming from. So I'm sure most of our viewers realize that the federal government has already spent all the money we gave them in taxes for this year.
And
that was already spent before we gave it to them. So what we're in effect doing is we are getting $600 that we are going to pay back over 30 years. So and we'll never actually pay it back, but they're actually borrowing our future income to pay us this $600 now, which will of course cost us much more than $600 over the long run. And they're doing it in many ways, like regardless of the real need for it. I mean, if you're making $75,000 a year, you still get a check for $600. A couple making $150,000 a year still getting a check for $600. Meanwhile, the person who was making, just over minimum wage and lost their job at the factory is going to get that same $600. Yes, most of it's going to get pumped back into the economy by by buying things and paying rents and stuff like that. But it seems to me that if you're making 75 grand and somebody else was making 20 grand and just lost that job, it might be better to make sure that that person doesn't wind up completely on the dole by getting them through the next couple of months. I don't know. That's just me.
Yeah, and I just want to add something to that too. If they're going to print the money, they could have printed $5,000 for everybody, or 10 or 20 or whatever it would take to stay in business. But they didn't. And the reason they didn't is because they don't want a middle class in America. They want the middle class out of business in America. They want a wedge that's going to turn people either into dependent on the government proles or limousine liberals who are living in gated communities. That's the America they have in mind for the future. Because people who are in the middle class who make their own money and pay their own taxes tend to not vote for these swine in the first place and can be a little bit unruly. And this is the long-term objective. It's exactly what happened in San Francisco. If you want to know why there's human feces on the street of San Francisco, it's because if you are the governor of the state or the mayor of San Francisco, you don't have to walk among the filth, but the proles do. And what's the point of being better than everybody else if everybody else gets to walk through a clean neighborhood and enjoy beautiful scenery and have their own businesses and drive expensive cars? What's the point of being a born lordling if the rest of the masses are living as well as you are? I'm not joking about this. They are absolutely determined to put the middle class out of business, and well, we'll just see if that happens.
Yeah, we will indeed. Folks, if you, for whatever reason, you don't get the $600 check or the bill falls through or something, don't worry, because you might not be able to build that guillotine. However, lamp posts are already there and rope is cheap. That's all you need to know. Folks, a lot of people are saying that this COVID relief package is proof that Washington is broken. And normally I would agree with that without a second thought. But then I did something weird. I had a first thought. And my first thought is that, no, Washington is working exactly as constructed, not as originally constructed by the Constitution, but as amended in the year 1913. That was a pivotal year in our history, and as far as I'm concerned, maybe the worst year aside from the Civil War years. 1913, we got the 16th Amendment, the Income Tax Amendment, which basically gave Washington the power to take whatever they wanted. We also got the 17th Amendment, which provided for popular election of the U.S. Senate. And what that meant was that there was no longer a gang of grown-ups there to put the brakes on whatever popular nonsense came out of the House. So that was over. We have two houses. There's no Senate anymore. There hasn't been a Senate in 100 years. Yeah. The third thing that happened in 1913 was the establishment of the Federal Reserve Bank. The Fed's job, since we went off the gold standard, is to print however many dollar bills it takes to paper over Washington's sins. And so between these three things, There's no limit on what they can take. There's no limit on what they'll do. And there's no limit on what they can spend. That's where we are right now. It is the progressive dream, and it is functioning exactly as designed. We got to undo this mess, folks. I don't know how yet. Going to spend 4 years thinking about that real hard, though. And that is your right angle on that, brought to you by the members at BillWhittle.com. Folks, I just want to remind you that content like this, information like this, needs sponsors like you. So if you've been watching these shows for free, please go to BillWhittle.com, click the join button, click the one-time donation button. Help keep us in business so we can maybe take some of these bastards in Washington out of business. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.